We turn our focus to expected economic policy outcomes from the governing party's conference. Now, the business community has called on the ANC to emerge with clear policy direction to eradicate historic inequality, fast-track economic growth and create jobs. Labour and mining analyst at Creative Voodoo Consulting, Mamokghethi Molopyane, joins us for this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Mamokghethi. I think let's start off with asking about the practicality of a solid economic plan that is expected, especially as we are seeing media reports of factional matters dominating this conference as opposed to policy discussions.
Good morning and thanks for having me. Absolutely. We can anticipate that the ANC will put forth something about economic recovery. After all, they've had a recovery plan since the pandemic, and we can expect that they will want to focus on speeding up transformation and making sure that the economy gets going. But in reality, and even as you were listening to them and watching and read the discussion documents, they're quite insightful in the sense that they have an idea what they want to do. But in reality, to me, what probably dominated the policy conference in the corridors is the step-aside rule. And as such, we know that there are provinces that have come out strongly against it. We know that there are individuals within the ANC who would be at the policy conference who are against it because of the implication it has on them and of the implication it has on their supporters. So yes, while in reality the discussions were about an energy crisis, the discussion were about how to get the country going forward, the discussions were about them being a governing and dominant party at the moment, leading policies about growth, policies about recovery, policies about improving the living conditions of everybody. However, the reality is that this policy conference takes place in, like all the other policy conferences, in the year where they will be electing leaders, new leaders at the end of the year. So they would want us to believe the focus is on urgent matters that are affecting society. And in a way, at the same time, yes, it may look like that. But in reality, the internal factions within the ANC are far too wider and highly, highly contested, such that we are going to see a smoke screen, as it were, that the key issues about the economy are going to be seen, are presented as being tackled. But in reality, underneath all that, it's the fight about the step-aside rule, but also it's the fight about lobbying for who they want their leaders to be. Because you'd recall to me that this policy conference, it's the first, besides the national conference that's coming, that all the regions are there, and so people from different regions get to, in a way, lobby and campaign and work with each other directly behind the scenes and in the corridors, and so it makes sense that while they would want the ANC to think they are concentrating on moving the country forward, reality is that it's about factional battle and ensuring that favorite candidate are gaining support or will emerge victorious. And
that's exactly the issue when we talk about politics and economic recovery, in that essentially the step-aside rule is one that is seemingly used as smokescreen for saying that maybe corruption could be justified. But corruption then becomes what we blame many of the lack of transformation in terms of economic reforms in South Africa too, because we lose a big chunk of allocated funds that are meant for service delivery and progression within the economic landscape. So how do we have that debate about what really should be the issue when we speak policy as opposed to politics?
Well, you'd recall that the ANC has always had better, in fact, good policy ideas. I mean, when you look at some of the policies that have gone to be or were led by them and have gone to be the key policies in government, and we've had National Development Plan for a while. There was ASGISA, there was GEAR, there was New Growth Path. So this highlights that in terms of thinking, conceptualizing, and arguably designing what they want as key policy, they have an idea what they want to do. However, it's the implementation part of it that becomes a crisis. And And now the implementation part is even hindered more by the fact that within the ANC, the division about not just ideology or about ideas about policies. I mean, we know within the ANC currently there are the radical economic transformation forces that are seeing the current leadership of ANC as being soft on the private sector and not having enough a push in terms of trying to transform the economy. At the same time, there are those who one would deem those who are practical about solving the crisis that South Africa faces. But one of the weakest standing position of the ANC as a liberation movement and a dominant party is that they have been unable to shift. Even the former President Bheki lambasted that, saying they must be able to adapt with time. They have been unable to shift themselves in terms of how they see black people. And by that I mean black people are not homogeneous. So the assumption that by simply appealing to the black votes that would work, it does not, because we are affected by things differently. South Africa has the highest unemployment, has the highest youth unemployment. Of those people, black females are impacted the most. And so far, when you look at the key policies of the ANC, they have been unable to touch core issues, for example, like how are we tackling unemployment among black women. And so those are some of the shortcomings, an example of the shortcomings that they have. Yes, the policy conference is coming to an end to me, but on paper it's going to look like they have great ideas here and there. But ultimately this is on the road to the conference of December, and only then will we know which ANC emerges and what are their key positions, what are the positions on policies of the economy, but also in terms of issues of social justice.
Interesting that you end off with social justice there, and I want to talk to you about a matter that is quite embarrassing for the governing party to be talking policy, and you and I at this point are focusing on economic policy. The Tripartite Alliance is made up of the SACP, but most notably COSATU, which is a labour federation, but the governing party is unable to pay its employees, instead telling South Africans and its own employees that their hands are tied. They will be paid when there are funds to do so. Where should the confidence be coming from if the governing party is telling its own that we actually trample on labour laws?
It is quite embarrassing, in fact, that they have a policy conference where they are unable even to pay the workers. Even if they do not have policy conference, it is quite embarrassing for COSATU, that speaks for workers, to not highlight this issue before even the policy conference takes place. The SACP, that has timelessly declared itself a vanguard of the working class, is nowhere to be seen on this issue. And so this highlights the disconnect between a political rhetoric, what the ANC wants to do as a governing party, and in terms of managing the country, but also the reality and their inability to pay their workers, their inability to attend to issues internally of the workers. But also it speaks of an organizational crisis that for such a seemingly straightforward matter, you are an employer, you are supposed to pay your employee and compensate them for their labor. They are unable to do that, to the point where workers who in COSATU, in the ANC, have to protest on the sideline of the policy conference, or argue or try to draw attention to that. And also it speaks of a party that is walking one way and leaving the other way, because within, after all, the party, there are people who have the capacity to solve the party's own financial problems. This is a party of multi-millionaires and even billionaires, but they cannot sort themselves out in the sense of ensuring that their ordinary members are rewarded. And so it speaks to the hypocrisy equally so, because we've had leaders who have said they do not go into the struggle to be poor. And these are the leaders who are supposed to be championing workers' rights. Beyond championing workers' rights, they're supposed to be looking and ensuring that we live in a society that, as they say, we are trying to put the people first, the Batopile principle, but clearly it is not seen as that. Instead, the party has become, and the alliance partnership as a whole, has become a stepping stone, as it were, for better position, for access to government resources. And that is why, for some of us, even when they discuss and debate and engage policy and come up with ideas what they want to do with the economy and moving the country forward, what really matters to many of them is retaining leadership, is being in the position that they are, is, as we have heard, consolidating, ensuring that the ANC, they are aware that their power is waning, ensuring that they remain they try to resuscitate, as it were, themselves. And it's never really about saving the people. And hence, as you see, the unhappiness that manifests publicly in society about service-related issues, about basic things, the unhappiness that manifests will probably manifest itself in 2024 come the election, as we are seeing many people who were historically in support of ANC are now saying they cannot move forward and continue to support the party that cannot even give the citizens the basic services.
Lastly, on that note, how important is it that these policy documents, particularly on the side of economic recovery, are scrutinized so that we do not end up with an electorate that is being sold dreams once again? Once we get to the voting poll, then there is a majority that has bought into an ideology that is not going to manifest.
Well, they themselves are going to say we have scrutinized our discussion documents, because you recall they come out way before the policy conferences. They circulate, they are meant to be discussed, and often they, within the alliance partnership, they would seek input. But in terms of the practicality, I think what one would look forward to the resolution of how, one, as a governing party that has been in government for so long, they are going to solve the energy crisis. What resolution would they have put forward? Two, how, as a government that aspires, or as a party that claims to be looking towards a developmental state or position itself as such, they are going to ensure that society moves forward and are driving policies that are about development and that are able to grow the economy. Secondly, how are they going to, what resolutions are they going to come out on current issues that we are seeing, unemployment, issues of security, issues of safety, and issues of ensuring that the economy is moving, the economic wheel is moving. Because at the moment the economy has stagnated, it's not performing well. The sectors that were meant to recover are continuously affected by electricity shortages. For example, mining bootstraps literally peaked the economy towards the end of the year and kind of like led it to a positive growth in a way. However, continuous power supply crisis has taken away those gains. Sectors such as mining, manufacturing are finding themselves struggling and unable to cope. And of course, we are not even going to talk about COVID-sensitive sectors such as tourism, because they too are affected. So one would want to see resolution on, for example, which is quite urgent, resolution on the energy crisis. It is quite alarming that the ANC is saying we are looking for the public to give us and members to give us inputs into how do we solve the energy crisis. Hello, they have been in government for a while. They should have had by now a clear direction and a clear policy about how to urgently solve this energy crisis. So I do not see anything tangible that is going to say to the economy, we are a party that is sure what we are doing about moving the economy forward.
Thank you so much, as always, for your insights. Creative Voodoo Consulting analyst there, Mamokghethi Molopyane, talking to us about what the business community, analysts and economists are talking about in terms of expected outcomes from the ANC's policy conference.